Good to see you too. Thank you.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm really excited. The stage is
Awesome. Me
yours.
too. All right. You ready for me to go?
Yes.
All right, here we go. So I want to thank Emery and of course Nigel Thurlow for recommending Agile Turkey. I'm grateful to be here. And since we have 30 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So as he mentioned, I'm an Olympic athlete. So this is sort of my bio slide. I like to point out that the picture in the top left corner was when I first arrived at college at Stanford, and I wasn't quite in great shape yet. And I think that's why I have the sweats on. Sweats are always forgiving. You'll see there's a picture of New Jersey. That is where I grew up. There's a picture of my son. And then I've got some other pictures here that show some of the places I've been and the competitions I've achieved. So one would think with this kind of background that I wouldn't have any problem sharing my accomplishments or letting the world know who I am. That's not actually the case. I actually had a little bit of a transformation a few years ago, and I like to say it leans on the lean wastes. We know there are 8 lean wastes. We talk about transportation or defects or waiting time. And then the 8th waste is the underutilization of people's talent. And this is the waste that I think really speaks to what I've gone through and what I'm going to share with you today. So you may ask yourself, well, how did she get here? And then I mentioned the Harada training, the Harada method. You may wonder what that is. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So in 2018, I coined the phrase CMO because I realized I was a chief minimizing officer. And what that means is I didn't share my accomplishments. I didn't want to stand out. I was concerned about what others thought about me. And so I avoided the limelight. And I remember 2 experiences specifically. Before I made the Olympic team, I had graduated from college and I was working full time. And I didn't tell my coworkers that I was training for the Olympics. And the reason is back then, some of the companies were doing massive layoffs. And I know a lot of people think that when you're training for the Olympics, somehow this big truck backs up into your driveway and delivers all this money to support your training. That's not what happens. I actually worked full time my whole career. And my thought was, as they look at the names, if they knew that I had this other thing going, they would say, oh, Pam, she doesn't need this job. She's training for the Olympics. And they might put my name on the list. I also realized that once I retired, once, the internet started getting bigger and bigger and all the different search engines were there, the worst thing I could hear when I started a job was for someone to say, I searched you. Now they'd probably say I Googled you. But I can remember I had kind of this fear in my chest and I thought, oh no, they know. And so now I start negotiating. Can we just keep this between ourselves? Can we not tell everybody? And I'm realizing I have done all this in this training. And I'm wondering, okay, what's going on? Why am I suddenly disappearing and not sharing what I've done? So I did a little bit of analysis. I did the 5 whys and I asked myself, okay, I'm minimizing my accomplishments. Why? Well, because I don't want to stand out. Well, why? Because I don't want others to be uncomfortable. Now, that's kind of interesting because why would my accomplishments make someone else uncomfortable? It's kind of strange. And then I said, well, why? Well, because sometimes when people find out your accomplishments and what you've done, they put you up on a pedestal. So when you start talking, you're here, and then all of a sudden they hear what you've done and they sort of move you up, and you almost feel like you're at this level that you don't want to be at, and you can't get off of it. And then I asked myself why. And the part there that got me was because I didn't want them to think I was better than them, because I don't think I'm better than them. But sometimes people have a tendency to do that. And then for the final kicker, I said, okay, well, why not? And then this was the thing that I realized, because I didn't want them to not be my friend. So in social settings, at work, there's happy hours, you go for coffee, lunch. And I had noticed at one point that the invitations were strong. And people would invite me and I would go, but then suddenly they start to disappear. And somehow in my brain, I told myself, they're not including me because of all that stuff I've done. They think I'm different and they don't necessarily want to have me around. Maybe they feel like I'll steal the limelight or something. And that was kind of painful. So somehow in my brain, I equated, if you share what you've done, they're going to move you out. So don't share. And that is what I'd done for years. Honestly, I don't even know how long I've been doing this. And so I decided to do a little bit of an autopsy on how much time I actually spent to get to be in the Olympics. And so these are the hours I put together starting in high school. I started as a sophomore in track and field, and I kind of, estimated. And if you're familiar with Malcolm Gladwell in The Outliers, he talks about, how many hours it takes for someone to be an expert. And he came up with the number of 10,000. So 10,000 hours of deliberate practice in what you're trying to do could make you an expert. Now, some will argue it's higher or lower, but there is a certain amount of time that it usually takes to get there. And based on my numbers, I was probably around the 8,000 mark when I actually made the Olympic team. And these numbers, again, these were guesstimates. It could have been higher. It's probably higher, but it's not too far off. And the fact that I just wiped that out of my past, it kind of stunned me. It shocked me. And so I've decided not doing that anymore. So I decided I'm now the chief happiness or Harada officer of my life. I embrace my accomplishments. I don't mind standing out. I'm here just to evident and show that I'm perfectly comfortable doing that. And I stopped saying no to opportunities. So when people ask me if I will speak at a conference or go to their school, I do my best to say yes. I'm a big LinkedIn fan. So if you're not connected to me, please do. I saw this slide when I was on LinkedIn, and this hit me because I realized this is what's going on. So according to James Owen, everyone's got a superpower. We're all good at something. And if you're in a creative field, you have to talk about that in order to get work and drum up business. But I realize what people are doing is they're not recognizing the difference between claiming your accomplishments or sharing and bragging. And according to them, it says proper pride says I'm good at this. So if I say I'm good at something, that's okay. But a lot of people interpret that to be I'm better than you when they say they're good at it. And this was big for me because I realized, well, why are we all of a sudden jumping to the other side of bragging? At some point, we've just got to own our accomplishments and not feel badly about that. So I actually have taught several Harada classes with different people. And I came up with this exercise, and this will show evidence to that. So I asked my students, there's some really big mailing labels on the table when we were in person. And I say, I want you to write your biggest accomplishment on the label. And so, a lot of them are, stressed. Like, what is that? It's like, did you get your MBA? Did you graduate from this? Or, what have you done that you feel your biggest accomplishment? So for me, I write the word Olympian, and then I peel it off and I say, okay, put it on your shirt. And you can just see them cringing in class. They're freaking out. Oh my God, I don't want to do this. I can't. So when we finally get them to at least get it on their shirt, I just kind of sit back and ask them, so what's going on? Oh, I don't really like to tell people. I think I'm bragging and everything. They immediately jump to that bragging thing. And I was like, well, why? This is an exercise in a class. I'm asking you to do something, and it's still affecting you this way. And then I tell them, okay, now I want you to go to the grocery store and buy some milk or some bread with your label on. And they just start falling. They say, I can't. They start negotiating. Can I do anything else, Pam? And so that is how I show them the point that not only was I feeling like I couldn't share my accomplishment, you're kind of in the same boat. And my thought is, you're going to the store to buy something and come back. Why does it matter what all the strangers that see you think? And, for me, I would take it as kind of like an assignment. And if someone asked me in the store, I'd say, oh, yeah, I'm doing a class and we have to do this. So, yeah, it's. But you shouldn't cringe for something like that. You should be able to wear your accomplishments with pride because that's why we work for them, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Harada method. So this is Norman Bodek, and unfortunately, he recently passed, but he worked with Takeshi Harada, and that's where the Harada method was named after. And he'd written a lot of books. He's an expert on lean, Mr. Bodek. And he worked with Takeshi Harada to write a version of the book that they could translate and have for English or for America, because originally it was written in Japanese. And the major focus of the Harada method is self-reliance. And that's the knowledge that everything you need to succeed is inside of you. I call that sort of the Wizard of Oz, the Dorothy thought, you always had it in you, Dorothy. So when she's out searching for something to make her life better, she learns that what she needs is already inside of her. So when we talk about the Harada method, here's the book. And I took a class, as I mentioned, and I actually got one of the books from the instructor, which was pretty cool. And what the Harada method does is it focuses on your mind, body, and spirit. So what you do is you're going to set a goal, and you're also going to have a coach. And within that goal, you're going to set up tasks and routines that focus on you and your goal, but also focus on service outside of you, taking care of your family, your coworkers, your neighbors. So we're trying to work on all of you with this method, not just that one goal you're trying to achieve. And that was different for me. I'd seen other goal frameworks, but I hadn't seen something quite like this. So we're in class, and as we come to class, we're supposed to make a list of our accomplishments, about things we're proud of. And I remember I struggled because there's a certain number you're supposed to hit, and I couldn't do it. And this was Nigel's friend who came to teach us. I sent him an email. I was like, do we really have to come up with this number? Because it's hard and I don't know. And he just sent me back a smiley face and said, just do it. And so this is when I'm starting to realize, okay, something's wrong here. And then while you're in class, you're given categories to rank yourself. You know, are you creative? You know, how strong do you feel? And it's on a scale of 1 to 10. So I'm filling in my numbers in class, you know, and I'm thinking, okay, I got a couple 7s and 8s. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And I glanced at the table of some of the classmates, actually folks I work with that I'm close with, and a lot of them were men. I saw 10s everywhere. They had so many 10s on there. I was stunned because I looked back at my paper. I didn't have any 10s. And I thought, wow, why do they think they are much better at some of these things? And why don't I think I'm better at these things? So one of the things that I think was the differentiator for me for this framework is that you have a coach. As you can imagine, as an athlete, I've had a coach a lot and I've done well with a coach. But somehow once you get out into the normal work life and you have bosses and you have your family, I didn't really have a coach anymore. And one of the things I realized, and you'll see here, a lot of famous people have coaches. There's a picture of Michael Jordan there, and he said, he thinks his best skill was that he was coachable. So even though he had talent and skills, he knew he needed to learn and to keep working hard to become better. And one of the things I've learned in my business career is a lot of the CEOs, CTOs, directors, they all have executive and personal coaches that are helping them. I don't know how many of you have a coach, but to me, my recommendation is find a coach. I have a couple of them. I think I'm high maintenance, so I need a lot of people to support me. But coaches make a huge difference. And I think the biggest thing is that they offer a level of accountability, because you may let yourself down if you say you're going to get something done. But when you know you're going to meet with your coach to tell them your update, you're probably not going to let them down. And when I was going through my training with the Harada method, Nigel was one of my coaches. And I thought, you know what? I'm not letting that guy down. I'm going to figure out how to do this. So this is the actual paperwork that I filled out for my Harada method. And it might be a little bit hard to see, but what you'll see is you set a 3-month goal, and that's what I have listed here. And I wanted to develop a training module of how I connect teamwork with other teams in the Scrum framework. And I didn't know what that was, but I felt like there was something there. So that was I was going to figure out. And then you set several levels for your goal here. And then this is kind of interesting where you talk about the why. Why are you doing this goal? How is it going to benefit yourself? And how is it going to benefit society or others? And I hadn't really done that before when I set a goal. I just set a goal and went and did it. And I thought, this is different. I like this. And the magic for me, that's part of it. You can't see it on the sheet I'm showing. But once you do that, you make a list of the times you failed. And then you create countermeasures, because you know you're going to hit it. So say you wanted to lose 20 pounds. And so say you get going, you got a few days, and then all of a sudden, you're going to hit that thing where you failed before. So now that you've already thought about it, you at least have some likelihood of not failing, because you already got a plan. Oh, this happened before. I'm going to do this instead. And I'd never done that before. So I thought that was great. Another part of the Harada method is you come up with 6 focus areas, and then you create tasks and routines that help support you achieve your goal. And again, it's service, it's mind, body, and spirit. So you can't just, do things at work for your goal. You have to try to maybe come up with things that are helping your family or helping society or helping your mental health. And that was different for me too, because normally you just focus on the goal, but I'm also trying to figure out how I can improve things with my family and how I can improve my spirit and my attitude. And I actually have to list things I'm going to do that are going to get me there. And again, that was way different than anything I'd ever done with setting personal goals. So this was the magical ta-da for me. I said I was going to come up with something to share in a training module, and I actually shared this in one of Nigel's training. Scrum had always felt easy to me, and I couldn't figure out why. I don't know what it was, but one weekend I was thinking about it, and then I figured it out. We're familiar with some of the roles and events with Scrum. We've got the chief product owner, we've got the roles here, and then you've got some of the events, the sprint planning, the daily stand-up, and so forth. And then it hit me. The reason Scrum is easy for me is because I've always done it. So in college, my chief product owner was the head coach. And then the product owners were the assistant coaches. So they were my main coach. The head coach sets the direction for the entire team. And then he gives assignments to the assistant coaches to work with the athletes. And so for the Scrum Master, it could have been another assistant coach or a team captain. I think that works well. The dev team, my teammates. And then when you plan, whether it's quarterly, release, or roadmap, my coach had to figure out what I was going to try to achieve in a year and when I was going to peak. So we get in school in September and our big meets are in May. So we had to figure out, okay, Pam is throwing the shot and discus. How far do I think she can throw at that time? And once we set that goal, he then backs my training up all the way into where we are. So he's got to figure out what days I'm doing weightlifting, when I'm throwing, when we're doing calisthenics, when we're stretching, and creates a schedule. So he came up with, I guess you'd call it a roadmap, but it was like a plan. And every month he gave me a sheet of paper. It was a month and it would have the dates and it would list what my training was going to be. And so I thought, okay, so then every day before practice, I either went to his office or he came down and he asked me, how are you feeling? If I was good, we stuck with the plan. If not, my legs are tired, I'm not feeling that well. We adjusted the plan and every day we could make those changes. And then at the end of the week, we tested the plan by having what we'd call a competition. So I would either go to a meet or we'd pretend we were in a meet setting at the practice, and then I would take competition throws. And then what do we do at the end? We talked about it. We measured, how are we doing? We had our retrospective. And so it hit me. The reason why Scrum is easy is because I've always done it. And I had never had it shown to me this way or explained to me this way. So this was my big aha. So like I said, before I took the Harada training, I was the CMO, but then I became the CHO. And now we're going to talk about high-performing teams. So I ask you, is this a high-performing team? I would say yes. I would say that they're cross-functional. And the reason I know that is because, for example, if the gentleman who's putting gas in the car somehow falls down or passes out, I'm pretty sure the person talking to the driver is immediately going to slide down and put gas in the car, because guess what? The car can't go without gas. And I think the same is true for the folks working on the tires. I'm pretty sure they can do the other functions. And I know you would agree with me that this is a high-performing team, because pit stops take seconds, and they have to have a coordinated plan, and they all have to know what the plan A is and plan B is and what they're going to do and how they can get in and get out. So when we talk about high-performing teams, we want to make sure we know what a team is. And you know, a team is one or more people, and then they have a common goal, and then they work together to get to that goal. So when I think about the high-performing teams I've observed, both as an athlete as well as someone in technology, there's several characteristics that I see consistent. And the first one is motivation. The people on high-performing teams are motivated. We're not dragging anybody across the line to get them to do things. They come in, they're ready, and they're anxious to do whatever they can do to get the job done. They also know the difference between teamwork and task work. So we know that task work is done by an individual, so they're working on it on their own, whereas teamwork is where you actually have to come together and work together on an interpersonal level. And you're always trying to improve your performance. And you actually have to have teamwork skills. And I know that not everybody learns how to work on a team. For me, it was easy because I always did sports. But for people growing up who may not do a lot of extracurricular activities, hopefully there's some sort of club or activity that they're doing where you're at least in a group, and now you have to learn how to work with other people. It's important that you hone those skills and excel at them to be a great teammate. going hand in hand with that is making sure that everyone has a shared mental model. So we're all knowing what we need to do, and we all, to some extent, agree with how we're going to do it. We're all running in the same direction. We can't have people running towards the outside and coming back around. We all have to be on the same page. And this is probably one of the most important. They got to have psychological safety. And for me, I've seen sometimes when I've gone into Scrum Master meetings and so forth, and someone will say, this is a safe space. And I realize just by saying that doesn't make it a safe space. What makes it a safe space is that the teammates trust each other and are willing to speak up and say things and not be afraid that someone's going to be mad at them or not talk to them or even ask them to be removed from the team. Because if you've got that kind of dynamic going, you're never going to have a high performing team. And I've seen this, like I said, on my athletic teams as well as professional. And then, of course, you got to know how to have conflict. And high performing teams always have conflict. But the most important thing is that they can have it, and then they can agree or they can agree to disagree. But yet when they leave whatever event or conversation they're having where there's conflict, they've got to agree that they're on the same page and they know what to do. And again, they can't be afraid now that the person they disagreed with is going to somehow come back at them or even recommend that they get removed from the team. Got to learn how to listen. And this is so important. I've learned over the years what active listening really is. And I've learned that if you're listening to respond, you're not listening. Because when I'm really active listening and someone's speaking, I'm continually clearing out the voice in my head that wants to say something. So when they're done speaking, I may take a moment and then say, so if I understand it correctly, what you're telling me is A, B, C, D, E. And then if they agree, now I need to take a couple more moments to come up with my response. So I know if I'm just jumping in there with responses, not really active listening, because your brain can't do both. You're either listening or you're actually coming up with something you want to say, but trying to do both is really hard. And you can tell when people are really listening to what's being said. So the biggest thing I've seen with sports teams and tech teams is that they have flow. And I believe Mihai, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his name here. He developed something called the flow state. And I know he also recently passed this year. But I like what he says this because when he talks to people who were in that flow state or optimal state, they talk about when they're doing something and it didn't take a lot of effort. It just happened. I know I've heard a lot of athletes talk about how, I would play in basketball. The basket just felt huge. Or even golfers talk about, I could have closed my eyes and it would have gone in. There's something about what they're doing that just feels like they're in that zone. And you'll hear that referred to a lot. And when I see high performing teams, it's evident that they're prioritizing their team and their teamwork, and they have a family feeling. You can almost feel like they're related. They know things about each other. They support each other. The way they treat each other is very important. And the level of trust within them is great. If someone suddenly has something with their family go on, everybody is swooping in to help do whatever they can. And it's really a beautiful thing. They also have something that I call team love. And team love is, like I said, it really feels like a family. And I've had this experience where I've worked in situations where everybody feels like a family, to the point that when we all ended up leaving a particular company, we're still connected. We still have an app where we communicate. I'm in a fantasy football league now with some of those folks. And the thing I like the most is if someone's looking for a job or they know someone who needs help, we just go there and let folks know, and everyone's working in their own individual company to see if there's a way that they can help them. And that is all because we had that kind of experience when we worked together. And, I just remember it was probably the least stressful time in my life when I worked with these folks. I felt such a level of trust. I actually had back surgery when I worked with this one group. And if you know anything about back surgery, it takes a while to get over. And you're just not going to be able to be 100% for a while. And, afterwards, I was home for 2 weeks working, and then I was supposed to start to go back in for a few hours. And I remember I went back and the CTO was there and he met me, and the other director of infrastructure met me, and they turned me right around and walked me back to my car. And they're like, yeah, no, you're not ready to come back. Go back home. And not everybody would do that. They would say, okay, well, yes, we have work to do. You need to get on it. But they cared enough about me to realize just by looking at me, yeah, she's not ready. Go rest. Take another week. We'll see you. Let us know how it's going. And, you know, that's a really special thing. So you'll know it when you're in it, but I'm grateful to have been a part of that. Another thing the high performing teams have is they all have Scrum values. There's not anything listed here that they don't exhibit. They're open, they have courage, respect, focus, and commitment. Every time I look at this, I change my mind as to which is the most important one for high performing teams. Today, I'm coming up with commitment, because when you have commitment to the team and to the people you work with, it feels like the other ones just kind of fall into place. If we say we're going to get this thing done and I've had something come up, I'm still going to take my personal time, whatever time I need to do to get that thing done. And I think that's one of the things that stands out for me for the high performing teams. So in summary, I have listed here high performing sports teams and technology teams, and I think it's the same. I think whether you're doing an activity or you're on a large Scrum team, it's so important that you have that special bond, and it takes time to form. People have asked me, how do you make a high performing team? You can't just throw people in there and say, okay, we're going to be high performing. It doesn't work that way. It takes time for them to trust each other, to get to know each other, to know whose specialties, who you can go to for help. It takes time to build the safe environment where they can support each other. They need people to coach them. They need to help them through conflict. They need them to have empathy. They've really got to understand that, you know, we're in this together. And one of the places you get those skills comes from sports or other activities. I know that's where I learned it. And I know my son, who is 12, is learning it. He's doing some sports activities, but he's also doing group projects. And I've seen some levels of frustration sometimes when you're waiting on someone to do something, because now you're dependent on how they finish out the activity. I was like, yeah, that's what it's like to work on a group activity. You're learning what that's like. You're learning the give and take that's required. And you're learning the skills to communicate to make sure that you guys are achieving what you need to. As I mentioned, all high performing teams also have high Scrum values, and they feel safe. You know, it's almost like there's nothing off limits. They don't have to worry about being judged because they know that the team cares about them and they want them to be successful. They want the team to be successful. And when one wins, they all win. That is my presentation. All done.
Oh, thanks, Pam.
Mm-hmm.
Great. It was really great. You give us great insights about high-performing teams. And I personally took many notes, actually.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you so much. And it reminds me that I remember I read a case about Google's high-performing teams. Maybe you heard about it, Project Aristotle. Yes. They investigated about the teams and the attitudes of the teams, actually, that make them successful. And the outputs are interesting and aligned with your solutions, actually. The trust, the psychological safety, feeling as a family, they are all important and they are key to success.
Absolutely. I agree.
That was perfect to hear from you. So now let's move on to QA session, if you want. So our first question, what is your suggestion to us to improve or sustain our self-motivation for remote working period in pandemic?
So how to improve your motivation because we're in the pandemic situation?
Yeah, it is hard, right?
Yeah, well, my first recommendation is to get a coach. Is there someone that can help you, that you can talk to, that you can get ideas from? Because what I say here is, you know, a moment in time, but having that constant, let me stop sharing so I can actually see you. There we go. Having that constant support, I think, is critical. For me, something I also do is I try to find the things that give me joy and I listen to them a lot. So there's a lot of podcasts, a lot of people I follow, and I learn from their experiences and stories, and I get ideas from them. So if there's a particular speaker that you enjoy or show, I try to make sure I'm listening to that. There's a lot of motivational videos out on YouTube and the internet. So I feel like you have to sort of do a deep dive into what works for you. And then once you find it, just continue to do that. But I would recommend that, as well as having at least one coach. I think I've got about 3 or 4 people I talk to pretty regularly, just to kind of help me out, especially if I get a little down.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So next question.
Okay.
You shared some ideas about psychological safety that is so valuable for companies. What is your suggestion to organizations to have this psychological
Well, first
safety?
you have to study it and understand what it is, because I think people just read, the bullet points and then just try to do it. Probably the biggest thing you can do is make sure you have a good feedback with the teams that are working there, with leadership and executives, because you need to be able to ask them how are they doing, how's our culture, what do you think we need to work on? And the employees need to be able to give that feedback without, again, being afraid that someone's going to know that they said it. So regularly getting that information and capturing feedback is important. And then you also actually have to make a plan and make the steps to do it. If you keep sending out surveys and asking, how are we doing? What can we do? And you get all this data and nothing happens, that's really bad. So the people need to see you actually doing some of the things that they've suggested, as well as maybe ideas you had, implementing them. If they don't see you doing any of it, then they're just going to feel like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to put myself out there because it's just not worth the risk. So that's what I recommend.
Great. So next question.
Okay.
Do you have any suggestion to build an organization as one team? Interesting question.
These are not easy questions, y'all.
Right.
One thing. Well, I think building fun into the organization is important. I don't know if they do any kind of charitable work, if there's opportunities to volunteer to help others. I find that that's really helpful. We work in a technology group, and I know we're planning a hackathon that's coming up. So that's always exciting to, allow the team to go innovate and do something other than the regular work. Because a lot of times they have great ideas, but we can't implement them because we're doing this other work that we said we were going to do. So I would say trying to come up with activities to allow them to do things other than just the standard work. And again, for me, you've got to get the leadership. It starts at the top to be on the page with whatever you're doing. And then they set the direction and the tone for the rest of the organization. So you can't just start at the team level and say, we're going to do all this great stuff and say it's going to change the whole organization. It's got to be top down, across, bottom up, all sideways, everywhere. I think that's probably the best ideas I would suggest.
Thank you so much. And I have one more question.
Okay.
Our participant asked, what is the optimum work-life balance in your perspective?
Honestly, it's an individual decision. I can remember when I was younger, my son was younger, I used to be a project manager. And when I was a project manager, I had to work all the time. So I would get up in the morning and do a little bit. I would work long hours, and then, I would pick him up. He'd come home from school or daycare. And then after we ate, I'm on the computer all the time. And I remember when he was little, he came over to me and he said, Mommy, you're always working. And, that hit me because I thought, wow, I have only so much time with him. And if I'm working all that time, I'm not, teaching him things and having fun and talking to him and getting to know him and making sure he's getting good direction and advice and feels good every day. So I think you have to sort of set some boundaries, and you have to decide, there are days where he's doing homework. So I'll bring my laptop in with him and I'll sit and do work because he's working. So it's not like I could, engage. Sometimes we'll watch TV shows together. But you definitely have to know, like, okay, I'm done working today. And then maybe if it ends up you work some hours over the weekend to make up for something, that's fine. But yeah, you got to set boundaries. You have to know I'm not looking at my phone until 8 o'clock or 8:30, or I'm not doing things. You have to take those breaks. I try to take walks during the lunch hour. And sometimes I'm actually listening to a meeting while I'm doing it. But I really try to separate that time and at least get outside and get some exercise. So that would be my suggestions.
Perfect. Setting boundaries, setting priorities, maybe questioning them regularly.
Yes.
Right? Because everything is changing so fast. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pamela. It was perfect. We are delighted to host you. And thanks for joining us. I hope we will see each other face to face.
Absolutely. I would love that. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
And now, I would like to remind you that Agile Turkey Summit continues at stage 1 after this short break, and I recommend you not to miss our keynote speaker, Bill Fisher. He will be on stage 1 at 3:30, and see you there. Bye-bye.